Welcome to another episode of In the Lab with Hoopsology. I am your host, Matt Thomas, joined by my co-host and best friend, Justin Goodrum. Justin, how you doing, man?
Good. After recording this podcast, no NBA games. A little bummed out, but not bad. We used to have college basketball going on this night, so looking forward to that. How are you, man?
Yeah, by the way, recording this on election night. No sports to distract us, so hey, why not talk about sports instead of hang around and watch the news or whatever?
Agreed.
So I much prefer this, so thanks for joining me tonight, Justin.
Yeah, likewise. Definitely prefer this. Yeah, totally.
So, yeah, we have a lot to talk about on the show today. We have a major team supposed to be a contender, allegedly. We're going to talk about their status. We're going to talk about an NBA player media altercation. We're going to talk about, I talked about some of my initial impressions this season. Justin might give us an impression or two of what he's seen so far with his return to the show this week. Before we jump into all of that, wanted to give a shout out to all the new listeners, followers on our YouTube and podcast channels. Thank you so much for your support of the show. We just had a great interview, at least maybe biasly so, but I thought a great interview with Jane McManus, writer and media expert, which dropped just on Tuesday of this week. So be sure to check that out. We have lots of great interviews that we're still dropping every single week, and we have more in the queue getting ready to release that we're really excited for you guys to hear, and a lot of great things on the calendar coming up. So shout out to all our guests, and shout out to you, the fine listener and viewer who supports and keeps this show running. Appreciate you all. Justin, anything else you want to touch on before we get into a quick headline involving the Spurs?
No, just want to echo your sentiments. Appreciate the support. Check out our archived interviews. A lot of authors, a lot of our previous guests have covered kind of different aspects of basketball culture, not only recently, but also in the off season as well. So just dig into his archives.
Absolutely. I feel like, especially with that interview we just dropped with Jane McManus, you just feel like my head is getting bigger. My brain is growing a little bit talking to some of these people and getting their insights. Always a lot of fun.
Agreed.
Without further ado, just a quick kind of headline here, status with Coach Popovich. Unfortunately, the news came out from Shams Charania that Coach Popovich is on indefinite medical leave. So the headline right here, San Antonio Spurs coach Greg Popovich suffered a health issue before Saturday's game, and assistant Mitch Johnson is expected to be the interim head coach for an indefinite period of time, including this past Monday versus the Clippers and Wednesday, which will be tomorrow as of the time of recording this show, against the Rockets. Sources tell ESPN. So, of course, a lot of the details are a little bit murky here and behind closed doors, but we do wish all the best for Coach Popovich and his family and the Spurs organization. Hope he can make a swift recovery and hopefully, presumably, a return to the court, hopefully sometime later this season.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really unfortunate, and I think also with Wembanyama's development, I think it's just critical, especially him in his second year, to have Pop out there. So hopefully it can get resolved and Pop can be back on the court. Just and unfortunate news when I just saw it break on all the kind of X and just all the other sports networks. Just hopefully he has a speedy recovery.
Absolutely. So we'll keep our eyes and ears on this story. And again, we hope he can return to the court soon. More importantly, get healthy soon. So let's go ahead and move forward with kind of our main focus of the show today, because I think it has been dramatic and shocking that the Milwaukee Bucks may be getting to the point, I don't want to call it too soon, but they may be reaching the point of no return. They may be dead on arrival for this season. They are 1-6 as of the time we recorded this podcast. And I'm not sure a team has ever started off that poorly and turned things around and won the NBA title. It's getting tougher and tougher with each game that goes by for the Milwaukee Bucks, a team that you and I both agreed in our preseason predictions would be most likely to win the Central Division in spite of the Indiana Pacers' progress that they made last season. And look at the teams that they faced. There's your Chicago Bulls that they lost to. They lost to the Brooklyn Nets. Those are the weaker teams that they've lost to. They've also faced some legitimate teams. They lost to the Cavaliers most recently. By the way, the Cavaliers are off to their best start in franchise history, so the Cavs seem to be no joke at 8-0. But their only win was their debut game against the injury-depleted Philadelphia 76ers. Even though that 76ers over the past few years has been an impressive team to get a win against, a pretty strong win, it wasn't for the season debut this year. So, Justin, I guess we'll talk about a lot more of the factors going into this as we go along, but do you see this as the schedule is contributing to this and we're maybe overreacting and having this as a main topic or concern, or is there kind of a pattern that you're seeing?
I think this is an instance of good news, bad news. Good news is that the play-in tournament's coming up. That is a good mechanism for teams to turn their fortunes around despite a slow start to the season. So I think that is, good news for the Bucks. I think the bad news is that the rest of the NBA, and I kind of foreshadowed what I'm going to talk about a little bit later with the impressions, but a lot of the NBA is pretty mediocre. So it's an alarming sign that the Milwaukee Bucks are this bad, where a lot of your quote unquote top teams are kind of 500 right now. I think that is a massive concern. So that's another red flag. And another red flag, which I've been hearing, is trade rumblings. Already we're hearing trade rumblings for Giannis, where he wants to go, if he's going to be traded, he's unhappy. And we're 7 games into the season. I mean, and we're hearing all this stuff here. So I think there is some troubling signs. I think they're talented enough to turn it around. They have a veteran coach, despite our misgivings about him. But at the same time, with the talent on this team, if they continue this way, I have to imagine this is, I think Doc Rivers is, we're going to have a repeat of last year, in reverse. So, yeah, I think there's some red flags. But, with the play-in tournament, I think it's possible for them to turn it around with a good performance.
So, kind of on the maybe negative side of this situation, and I am curious to see, does play get more casual and allow the Bucks to come back during that play-in tournament, or does it tighten up and get more competitive and that makes the losses worse for the Bucks? We'll see what happens. But I guess one of the negatives in all of this is that really Giannis's quality of play has not gone down, in spite of trade talks and any sort of controversy around that. You certainly want to keep Giannis if you're the Milwaukee Bucks. You don't want him going anywhere, if at all possible. I mean, unless you think it's like we have to trade him or he's leaving type of situation. Even then, I think I roll the dice on trying to keep him and just trust that the extra money you're getting in extensions, staying with the team that drafted you is going to be enough incentive. But we'll see what happens there. But really, Giannis is performing at an elite level still. I do wonder, and I'd like your thoughts on this, is there a little bit of buyer's remorse in Damian Lillard? Because it does seem like he's sort of in a pattern where, yes, he can be incredible on certain nights, but it doesn't seem like it's night to night like it used to be in maybe what was his prime in Portland. How do you feel about Damian Lillard? And I know we're early in the season again. It's a small sample size, but we are in the beginning of year 2 with Damian Lillard.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good of a defensive player do you think Damian Lillard is? 10 being phenomenal, 0 being trash.
I think what I would preface this with to soften the blow is that, he's, I believe, like 6'2", 6'3" guard.
Sure.
There's always, like Steph Curry, he has functioned well getting a lot of steals, but a lot of his success was the Golden State defense itself and how they worked as a unit. So given that nice preamble, I'm going to use the number probably like 3.
Okay.
How
I
do you
say
feel?
that, yeah, I'm right there with you. I say that because if his offensive production is not offsetting that, then he's a liability.
Good point.
So, and with the Bucks, they're known for their defensive prowess. So, I think with Damian Lillard, I'm not willing to have buyer's remorse on him yet. But I think with his offensive production, I've heard rumblings that it has been lower than last year, and certainly within Portland. So I don't. Again, I think it's early. I want to see, especially with this play-in tournament. I think that is a good barometer to see, how they are, especially if they, it's a good motivator. It's a good way to turn around the season. You have a rough start, wipe the slate clean, win the play-in tournament. You got momentum headed into Christmas. No one even was talking about the beginning of the season. So it's not time to panic yet. But if they play terrible in this play-in tournament, yeah, I think there's just some serious questions with Damian Lillard, especially him being a veteran, especially the hype and then what he stands for as a player, and for them to go be off to this terrible start with the rest of the league being really kind of mediocre. I think there will be some remorse if they're terrible in the play-in tournament.
Tell you what, I think you're more of an optimist than I am on this topic because I sort
Oh
of
wow!
have my hand like right over that panic button
Oh
if
wow!
I'm a Bucks
Wow!
fan. Now,
Makes
it's
sense.
like you said, it's only 7 games, so I mean, numerically, it's rational to say what you just said, and I think that's a fair take. But I have serious doubts if they're going to be able to turn this around, especially given another point that on the maybe on the positive looking side of all of this is that Chris Middleton is injured, and has been out the whole season at this point, carrying over from last season. Unfortunately, Chris Middleton just has an awful injury history. So there's kind of some positives that he hasn't been on the court, so you haven't seen them at full strength. But at the same time, the question remains like, when is he coming back? And what will that look like? Like, what percentage of a fully healthy Chris Middleton are we going to get? Like, do we see this squad even achieve full power at some point this year? I think is fair
Yeah.
questions when we're talking about writing the course here and getting to a winning record. Let's get there first before we even talk about the Central Division. I want to also mention with Doc Rivers, because last season there was of course all the chaos. And in spite of the strong record to start, there was just enough animosity. We covered it in depth in our show. You can look back in our library if you want to hear the takes about that, even with beat reporter from Milwaukee. So Doc Rivers came in and brought a certain level of stability. In our preseason predictions, my take was kind of that Doc Rivers has led some very successful regular season teams. I wasn't buying that he was going to elevate this team very much in the playoffs. But now that there's instability in the regular season, that's where I think I feel a little bit more panicked because, hey, I thought you guys had this for at least the regular season. Now I don't even know if that is guaranteed at this point.
Yeah, no, I echo your concerns. And don't forget also, Giannis is battling a strain right up Dr. Muscle as well. So he's not 100% either. And, who's the first to blame when things go wrong? It's the coach. And Doc Rivers has a track record and he's expendable. So, I mean, ESPN might be getting another commentator and he might be, he's only there for 1 year. He might be going to NBC or Amazon. So we'll see what happens. But, with your logic, yeah, I think I'm not prone to hardcore disagree with you, even though I might be the optimist in this
I
situation.
would be pretty shocked if Doc Rivers was let go, but I guess you never know. I mean, if they're in a
Yeah,
situation where they get to like 5-15 or something
yeah,
like that, and it's this early in the season, I mean they'd be paying Doc Rivers a lot on the back end of this contract, of course. But yeah, things. I mean, then maybe because right now I don't really buy Giannis trade type of talk,
hmm
but if it's getting to that point, goodness gracious, yeah, you wonder if there will be a fire sale in spite of everything. To your point on Giannis, I mean, if he gets injured, all bets are off. I mean, if he's unfortunately out for even like 15 plus games, I think would be really, really hard for this team to weather, especially while Chris Middleton still remains injured and on the bench.
Yeah, totally agree.
So you and I both picked the Bucks as the
We
winners of
did.
the Central Division. I don't think that was a ridiculous take. If you could hit a magic reset button right now, would you pick, say, like the Pacers or the Cavaliers? Would you be willing to change course on that pick?
I'm gonna again. I keep saying it like a broken record, but I'm not trying to hit the panic button yet. Let's see where they are at Christmas. I'd say the beginning of December. Let's this whole month. Let's see what happens. If that's the case, if they're sitting at the bottom, I mean the Pistons are ahead of them, and if they're I mean look at the middle of the pack. Everybody's 3-4 or 3-5. So to me, they have a huge. It's not like they're just a little bit behind. They're 1-6. I mean that is a pretty atrocious start.
Yeah.
With the Pistons, who was like one of the worst teams in the league for the past few years. I mean, that is disgraceful. I mean, it's one thing if they're having a rough start, they're in the middle of the pack, whatever. I don't think we have this conversation. Again, they got a month to turn it around. If they don't, I'm with you to reconsider my selection, but try not to panic, not just yet.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead just to keep this entertaining. I am going to hit the panic button in terms of Central Division winner. I'm actually gonna go with the Pacers. I know they have like a 3-4 record, I believe, at the time of recording this show. But I still see that team as a little bit more of a threat than I do the Cavaliers, in spite of the Cavaliers' hot start. So I'm going to hit the panic button and pivot that direction. It'll be interesting to look back and see as we check in periodically throughout the season how this division progresses and who ends up kind of separating themselves in the top part of that division. You mentioned the Pistons. I got to give them a shout out for beating the Lakers right after I record an episode kind of praising the Lakers for some of their early season success. So thank you for bringing the Lakers back down to earth, Detroit Pistons. Shout out to you all and congrats on that victory.
No, yeah, I mean, they got a momentum. Let's see if they can ride it or they'll fall back to earth. I mean, Detroit deserves it. And I have to say, with our videos, that despite how badly they have performed, they have some of the most loyal fans just based on how our videos, when we interview some Detroit insiders for their insight on how they're doing. So no doubt the fans deserve it. That's for sure.
Let me ask you just quick fire really quickly. And I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but I talked about it a little bit last show and I find it interesting. There's so many different takes on the Knicks so far this season. And I just want to know what your initial impressions are. I mean, they're right around 500. I'm not having any sort of similar take like I do with Milwaukee. It's not time to panic in New York, but how are you seeing that fit and how are you feeling about the Karl Anthony Towns deal in hindsight? Because both the Timberwolves and the Knicks have had some struggles early on, and it's been a big change in the fit of their roster and how they execute now with those new pieces. So I guess starting with the Knicks, just initially, how are you kind of feeling with what you're seeing? Are you buying any of the panic that's out there?
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to the Karl Anthony Towns trade, right? And to me, it kind of are you trading one disappointment for another? I mean, you take a look at how many years did people expect Julius Randle to be the man, right? And I think in basketball, we pretty much know, who's the superstars, who's not. Jalen Brunson, clearly, when he got to that team instantly.
Right.
It wasn't like a few-year process that we saw him evolve. Immediately, he became, I think, the leader of that team. And I think with Karl Anthony Towns, my question is, can he be a complement to that? I think it's too early to tell. I'm willing to give him some grace to acclimate to that city. I think similarly to playing in Los Angeles, I would say LA, Boston, and New York. Those are probably the three toughest cities to play in, no matter how good the team is. So at this point, I'm not willing to say it's time to panic just yet, but I don't know. I think I was on the Karl Anthony Towns bandwagon early in his career, but just after so many appearances and his performance, I don't know. I think especially in that environment, I am highly skeptical that he's going to be the player that the Knicks are seeking in terms of taking the next level. But we'll see. I like Karl Anthony Towns as a person, and I like some of his game. but in terms of being that superstar that they're looking for, I'm quite skeptical. But I think it's too early just to write him off.
Yeah, I guess it's nice that in New York he can kind of grow into that role. And to echo some of your points, I have actually, so initially my thought on this was I thought the Timberwolves may have won the deal just because they got that extra piece in DiVincenzo.
Good point.
But now I feel after things have played out a little bit that there's certainly more room for growth with the Knicks. Whereas I'm not sure, I'm less confident about that fit of Julius Randle on the Timberwolves offense because they have so many bigs. They rely on Gobert. They rely on getting to the hoop. And Karl Anthony Towns, to his credit, does shoot from a decent percentage from outside. So it's like they kind of gave away some of their spacing, which you and I both know is important in 2024 in the NBA. So I do have a lot of questions about that. It's been clunky on both teams, though, in fairness. And I'm definitely someone who not a huge terms of playing wise, not a huge fan of Karl Anthony Towns. Nothing against him as a person, but I've never been a big fan. He doesn't have to be the superstar in New York. There is an option there where he can be the third option like he was in Minnesota. I don't know about Julius Randle. It feels like he's got to be the second option on that team at least for them to have success, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Yeah, we'll see.
A quick break from In the Lab to request a favor. If you love the chats with Matt and I, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video. Also, by doing that, you get all of our back interviews featuring commentators from the WNBA and the NBA, our interviews with PA announcers, and our interviews with journalists from SB Nation, NBC Sports, and The Athletic, and a lot more. Again, please subscribe. Thanks, and now back to In the Lab.
So let's go ahead and move to, I think we would both agree, some pretty disappointing news, some kind of just a wild altercation that happened. And I'm sure you all that are tuned in to the NBA on a regular basis are well aware that Joel Embiid had an altercation and I guess physically shoved a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer who's named Marcus Hayes, the result of some criticism in a report. And to give you guys context, let me pull this up and read the specific paragraphs from the story that I think were what incited all of this and what caused all of this, along with some past history, I'm sure. So, quote, Joel Embiid consistently points to the birth of his son Arthur as the major inflection point in his basketball career. He often says that he wants to be great, to leave a legacy for the boy named after his little brother, who tragically died in an automobile accident when Embiid was in his first year as a 76er. Well, next paragraph. Well, in order to be great at your job, you first have to show up for work. Embiid has been great at just the opposite. Now in his 11th season, he consistently has been in poor condition. This poor conditioning apparently seems to have delayed his debut this season. Embiid won't play in Wednesday's opener or the next two games, end quote. So Justin, obviously you have more experience in sports journalism than I do. What are your thoughts in terms of, I think you and I both agree blanket that, you know, physical violence is not a good solution in this situation. I don't think anyone was hurt as a result of the altercation. But what are your thoughts on the story and the reaction? And I guess just give me your thoughts on the whole situation.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think we're at a critical point, and we talked about this with Jane about reporters in the locker room, right? And I think we have to make some distinctions. So this kind of, I don't want to get too political, but if you take a look at like the news, right, like your 5 o'clock news, 5:30, 6, your anchors giving you information about the news, right? They're not supposed to have an opinion. They're disseminating information to you. So compared to your cable network, so whatever flavor you like, you know, I wouldn't say those are reporters. They're giving you their opinion, whatever side of the aisle you are on. I think we would agree on that. And I think that goes with a columnist. So I question with this columnist. He's a columnist, not a beat reporter. So to me, I think it's you cross the line when you bring in family. I don't know why you just couldn't say, hey, he's out of shape. He needs to get it together. This is a big, there's plenty of things to criticize Embiid about without bringing his family into it. So I thought he crossed the line there. Now, with Embiid, you should never put your hands on another person, period. I think he deserves to be suspended, which I believe he is. I think we got the press release.
3 games. That's correct. Yep.
So I think I probably would have suspended him more, to be honest. Probably another 2 games just to make it a point. You can't put your hands on a reporter like that. But I think this highlights an inflection point on access. I think there is a lot of I forgot. Man, I'm kicking myself because I think it was ESPN. I don't know. I don't want to get the wrong outlet, but I saw a video detailing really athletes, specifically in the NFL. They are pushing to not have reporters in the locker room. They want them outside the locker room for more privacy. And I think with the COVID, that really highlight that it was paradise because reporters weren't allowed in the locker room. We covered that extensively on our show,
right.
With reporters losing access and covering athletes. So I think now this might be, a reference case later on for reporters might be losing their access to the locker room just in terms of that player-reporter tension, despite that who was at fault in this situation. I think it's unfortunate. Again, I think the columnist crossed the line. I think this is not a shock. Columnist has been doing this for years, just in terms of kind of the same thing with radio talk show hosts with, wanting to say something salacious. Or what we're seeing now on social media. So this is not uncommon. But I do think that the columnists crossed the line and bringing in family. However, of course, I don't condone Joel Embiid using physical violence, and I do think he should have been suspended a little bit more. That's my opinion.
It's kind of interesting. I agree. What's interesting to me is I don't think it's necessarily what was said or what was written, I guess, but how it was written when I read over that, because to go back to Karl Anthony Towns, unfortunately for him, he lost family like over the past couple years. The unfortunate thing, I mean, for anyone to go through. That was reported on pretty widely. And so that is like bringing family into the situation, but it done in a way that was, sympathetic, empathetic, and respectful. This that I just read off, I won't read again, but you all heard that kind of hard transition where they talk about Embiid's son and who he's named after. And then it just goes into the next paragraph right away. Well, to leave a legacy, you need to blah, blah, blah. And Embiid's doing this. It is just very, very inflammatory the way that it's written. And I'm someone who tends to support criticism coming from the media. I think that's an important role for the media, but I think the way this was handled, as you mentioned, was in a way that's just off-putting and unprofessional. I think the criticism should be able to be handled a little bit better and more maturely. I would echo what you said, like we should not be putting hands on each other for something that's, written in a column, but it was just really clunky and weird the way that was written. So kind of like it's not what you said, it's how you said it sort of a situation.
If he doesn't mention the family, I mean, I think he's 100% right.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
Why do you
content of the missed time is correct. Sorry.
Yeah. So why you mention the family? When you mention family, religion, politics, I mean, you gotta know better than that. Especially if you have a working relationship with these players. I think criticism is cool. I think within basketball, that's totally in bounds. But when you're bringing outside forces, especially with these athletes, they're not reading your stuff. They're hearing it secondhand. I mean, you got to know how to play the game. And, this reporter certainly paid the price, even though, I don't condone physical violence. And I do think the league should have come down harder on Embiid. But I'm not happy with this columnist, what he did. I get what you're saying. Was it like super duper inflammatory? Probably not. But just when you cross that line there, and I mean, he lives there. You brought him up. You know Embiid's history with this. You got to know better.
Yeah, well, and just that hard pivot again to like
Yeah.
making it so big, like Embiid is injured, and yes, we know that that's going to be a big part of his narrative in his career, unfortunately. But he brought it so deep by bringing family into it, and like, I mean, getting in this place where he's like, your legacy tied to your son and all of this, like way deeper and more inflammatory than it needed to be, like you said.
Yeah, totally agree.
We'll see, unfortunately for the 76ers franchise, the outcome of this is that Embiid is not going to be on the court for a few more games to serve this suspension as a result of his actions in response to the article. And I think that's smart of you to bring up kind of the meta level of this conversation as well, which is incidents like this occur. You just get more and more things stacked up in a case that may result in media losing more access, which I think is something, at least I'll just state my opinion. I don't want media to lose any more access than what they've already lost. I would like them to regain territory that they've lost.
Well, I think this is an interesting conversation because when I saw the story with the NFL, look at Stephen A. Smith, and we have agreed, disagree with him over the years.
Sure.
But you take a look at him on First Take, him, even Adam Schefter, Shams, Woj when he was active, like, what's the number one device that's around him? It's the cell phone. And I think in the 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s, to gain access to talk to reporters, the locker room was very important. Now there's a text message. So to me, just think the roles are reversed. You're an athlete. Your privacy is gone. Especially now in the age of social media, like, especially the players in the NFL. I mean, I am sympathetic to the fact that, they're in a vulnerable state. I mean, some of them are naked. They're coming out of the shower. We can't take it for granted, like, as males, just in terms of, like, you see different sports and, like, they're coming out of the shower to do a post-game interview. But that's pretty abrasive. Like, the game is over. You had a post-game press conference. And to me, I think it's one of those things in the age of technology where there's DMs, Zoom calls, you can just wait for the player to come out of the locker room. I think there's another way of doing it. That's just as my opinion. I'm kind of on the play. It's weird, especially with my journalism history. But I feel them in terms of their privacy not being respected, especially in this day and age where somebody can have a camera phone. Something can go wrong. I understand where they're coming from on this, and to me, especially when you're getting information, like if you're tight, like with Stephen A. and Allen Iverson, like let's say Stephen A. is just covering AI right now. AI is playing. Like, does he need to be constantly in the locker room to cultivate this relationship with AI? I don't think so. He has his cell phone number, or he can text him, or he can just hang out with him after the game. Like, I just think with the locker room, especially with the NFL, they're saying, hey, meet them outside the locker room. I don't really see too much of a difference. Like, why is inside the locker room so special compared to outside of it if the players are going to be available? I don't really see the difference, especially when they have availability with the post-game press conference. I do think that's important, post-game availability. But I think inside the locker room compared to outside the locker room, in which NFL players want, what is the difference there?
Yeah, let me play devil's advocate. First, the locker rooms are huge.
Sure.
There's a lot of space you could get changed and all that stuff. The other thing that I think is most important that you miss out on, you personally, Justin, but just in talking about this timing issue, is if we go to DM or text, you don't get the in-person interaction. You don't get the body language, for one thing, which if you're writing a story,
Fair.
I think details like that are important. I think
Fair.
also for, fans potentially seeing the emotion on the player's face, or even just understanding the context of their statement that they're making, that can be really important. Now, camera on the player doesn't necessarily have to happen in the locker room. I'm thinking more for getting info for stories and things like that. But also if you miss out on some timing, and this is more a case where I could see the argument both sides, because there could be and has been a lot of bad in getting those initial riled up reactions. I mean, in like right after a game, when you're still angry about the result or what happened. And there's a lot of great sound bites over the years. There's also a lot of unfortunate moments that have come out of things like that. So there's pros and cons there, but I guess you're getting a little bit more of the raw emotion and genuine thoughts would be kind of my counterpoint if I'm playing devil's advocate.
That's fair. I think there's a way of having a happy medium in this. Like,
Probably
I
so.
don't think this is some kind of like either or. I think there can be some kind of hybrid or something to make sure that, hey, maybe both sides don't get ultimately what they want, but at least they can kind of meet in the middle to just improve things. But I think regardless in this situation, I mean, Embiid would have found this dude, after the game in the parking lot. I mean, it seemed like it was on site with this guy, regardless of the forum. So
yeah, this was through a column. This wasn't through like guy asks an inflammatory question in the locker room and then gets shoved.
Yeah, he would have found this guy somewhere.
This isn't really a great case that would meant locker room access, I guess, because
I don't think so either. But I just think you know how the media just construes everything.
Oh,
I
sure.
think a situation, like this might, persuade one side or another. So we'll see.
For sure. Wrapping up towards the end of our show here, Justin, I wanted to get, I gave a few of my initial thoughts, one of them being kind of one we hashed out a little bit with the fallout from the New York, Minnesota trade there, but wanted to just pick your brain and if you have a thought or two, a takeaway or two from the start of the season that you've noticed so far.
Yeah. A couple of things. I mentioned it earlier. I might have spoiled my point. I would say the mediocrity so far. Like everybody's kind of in the middle of the pack. That's one observation. Two, and I got these from The Athletic, but I agree. I'm wearing them on my, my shirt says it, but the Bulls are just such. They're just a weird team. This is the worst I think of being a fan because at least if your team's terrible. At least there's a thing of, hey, let's just get rid of the guys and just start over. And then, of course, if you're doing well, you know where the gauge is. But if you're just mediocre, you're just stuck in this purgatory forever. And I just think you traded one purgatory, literally two of them, with Alex Caruso and DeMar DeRozan for another when you get Alonzo Ball back. And Alonzo Ball has looked pretty good, and he's on a 16-minute restriction. And then he's gone for 10 days with a sprained right wrist. But I think he's shown some signs of what he was before he got hurt. So I think in the Bulls have played decently. I think Kobe White, I know he came on last season. He's continued that. So that's been really solid. I have to say Zach Edey is probably, I would say, the most surprising thing this season. I think he's going to be a monster. I saw some of his highlights against the Brooklyn Nets, and the guy gets like put down dunks all the time. Like to put the ball up, he dunks it. Like I think if he improves his footwork, I think it's going to happen. I think.
So your surprise would be how impactful he's been already?
I think so. Just how much of an impact. I mean, he had 25 points and 12 rebounds, 4 blocks. I think he is going to be such a force that they desperately need for Ja Morant. Especially, you saw when that team missed Ja Morant, how the Grizzlies struggled, and having Edey there, another, I think, force, especially with the changing landscape of the Western Conference, he is desperately, desperately needed. And I think he's really been awesome to watch this season. And then one more impression real quick.
Sure.
And Athletic brought this up, so I give them the credit. I think Zion's inefficiency, they point to. Zion Williamson of the Pelicans. He's only shooting 36%, which I think in his last 4 games, which I think could be a troubling sign just because of his health and the way this guy, I mean, the most of his baskets come, close to the basket. I mean, this is not a 3-point shooter or a jump shooter. So for him to not be shooting that well is a troubling sign right now. But to me, I have to say, I don't know. I've not been excited about this season. Maybe it's my mood. Maybe it's just because of all the downer stuff because of the election. I have no idea. But I think I have not been excited about the beginning of the season. I will say, and I disagree with this. I think it was Bill Simmons that brought this up or something, or some other people. And I think we were right on saying this, that the Celtics are playing with a lot of motivation. And I
Yeah.
think that's good for the league because typically you see maybe a lull or a team or the champs take it easy. I liked how they're taking it personal. I think they should be going after every team and trying to embarrass them. And I think that's great for the league because you have a power team that's actually set to be motivated to play every night. So I'm happy to see that despite take whoever side you want in the whole Tatum, Steve Kerr controversy. I don't really care. I think it makes for great television, just in terms of them just wanting to humiliate the rest of the teams in the NBA. So I think that's a positive. But yeah, I'm just kind of down so far. I think there's been a lot of mediocrity so far.
Yeah, and I think you can pat yourself on the back, Justin, because you were saying all through the offseason, like this Olympic thing is good for the Celtics. They're going to come back hungry. You were kind of more on that side, whereas I was a little bit more on the side of I don't know if there's going to be like a little bit of a championship hangover. So to your credit, and so far to this point in the season, I mean, I said last week, I think from what we've seen now, and that's been confirmed, the Celtics have the clearest and easiest shot to the finals once again.
Yeah.
So I
think so.
fully expect them to be back there, assuming we don't get some sort of horrible injury or something that we hope never happens.
Even if they get a horrible injury, I mean, they still have Porzingis.
Porzingis is out, yeah.
I mean, I would say unless somebody's out for the season or something, I mean, I don't want to wish anything bad upon them, but they have some flexibility even if something were to go wrong. So they're in a good spot.
Great early impressions. Do want to mention just real quickly before we wrap up, what fascinates me most about Zach Edey and watching this situation is he's kind of a time capsule player, if I can put it that way. It's kind of like a little nod to a past era where you wonder if those post skills are going to translate over. You probably remember Jahlil Okafor when he came out of Duke, where everyone was like, I don't know about his defense, but his offense is Tim Duncan.
That's true.
And then he was very quickly relegated to the bench. And I'm almost positive he's been out of the league for at least 3 years now at this point, probably playing overseas, hopefully, or doing something, because he was very talented. But part of the 3-point boom is that you really just can't waste a lot of time on offense. So I'm curious if Edey is able to, just simply because of how the league is in 2024, and we've had already, I believe, a record number of 40 attempt 3-point games by a single team. I think we've already had over 10 instances where a team has attempted over 40 3-pointers. You wonder if he can exist in a league like this. So I'm glad to hear about the success he's having so far.
If his rebounds stay solid, then I think he's going to have a lot of success, because just think with a lot of threes, if they're missed, you get, you do the math with, what's it called? Analytics. So if you're able to get a few of those rebounds, a few of those putbacks, if he's a decent foul shooter, I mean, you make up that difference. I mean, even if you miss the 3, you still get the 2, either through foul shooting or through the putback. So, I mean, that's an incredible advantage if a team can capitalize on that. So far, so good for Edey, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would love to see a continued resurgence of the big man in the league. I mean, obviously, Jokic, who's kind of one of a kind, obviously multiple MVP. Embiid won that MVP, but then it's, slimmer pickings after mentioned those two who have had recent MVP seasons. So it'd be great to have more bigs in the league. That's probably my bias and when I fell in love with the league coming through, but I think it's good to have that variety of things to watch. Certainly, I do not want to see 40 3-point attempts every single game that I turn on with the NBA. No disrespect. And obviously the math and numbers games, it makes sense. And the talent certainly that's out there. But in terms of the viewer perspective, I'm rooting for you, Zach Edey. Continued success. Wishing you a great rookie campaign. We're going to go ahead and call it a night with all of this. Hope you all are enjoying the episodes we're dropping. Thank you for sticking it out with us to the end of this episode if you made it this far, and thank you for your continued support. Justin, anything else before we sign off?
Not much. Just everybody stay safe out there. And again, enjoy our archives. We have a lot of other great interviews coming up. So stay tuned to our feed. So wherever you listen to your podcast, check it out. And also our YouTube feed as well.
Justin Goodrum, I'm Matt Thomas. We'll see you back in the lab again really soon. Peace out.
See you next time.